So welcome to the September 23rd, 2021 Inspiring Author Conversations. This is Kathy Davis with Davis Creative Publishing Partners. Today we'll be speaking with Carin Fahr Shulusky. Before I welcome Carin, I do want to remind everybody of a few logistic details. The call is being recorded and your presence at these meetings serves as your permission to be seen in the recordings. Please mute yourself on your end, and so as to avoid any background noise. Please find your chat button down at the bottom of your screen. There's also, I don't know if anybody has noticed, there's this new little reaction button down there so that you can always, while we're talking, you can always do a thumbs up or a heart or a laugh or a clap. Clap is applause and clap together. A clap. Yeah, that's what it is. And you can play with those buttons. I've been on a couple calls where people were using those. So our theme for 2021 continues to be helping inspiring authors. Each month we welcome guests who are either an inspiring author or someone who helps to inspire the authors by sharing knowledge, new ideas, opportunities, and wisdom. Please help me welcome Carin. Carin Fahr Shulusky is a wife, mother, grandmother, and former marketing professional. Not one to take an easy retirement. She published her first book, I see a couple people are hopping in here into the call. And didn't mean to interrupt right in the middle of the bio. But so Carin, I know originally we met back when you were in the advertising industry, and you've recently published your book In the Middle in 2021. You also have contributed a chapter in one of our anthologies, Living My Truth, about the personal legacy and impact of former U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the impact she had on your life as a young marketing professional for a Fortune 500 company in the early 1970s. Her first book, In the Middle, is part fiction and part memoir. Let me mute a couple people here. There we go. And In the Middle is part memoir about being suddenly forced into the role of caregiver to your elderly mother, while also juggling your already demanding career and family life. Your second book, My Lost Year, is the fictional account of a family facing the upheaval of the 2020 global pandemic. Welcome, Carin. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I always love talking with authors because we get a firsthand feel of what it's really like to be an author. And first, I want to start with what inspires you as an author? How did you come up with these ideas for your two books?
Well, the first book I wrote about 5 years after my mother passed. And I think that the thing about that I wanted to write was I was a reluctant caregiver. And I was sometimes angry about, I have to give up so much. I have to spend so much time that I wanted to do other things. And I wanted to get that honesty out. I wanted to say that. And there were things that happened that just, honestly, I will say every day before I start writing, I pray. And I believe sometimes the words just come to me. Mm-hmm. But that story, when I started writing In the Middle, I wasn't intending to publish it. I just had something I wanted to say and started writing. And it wasn't until I got near the end, and then I didn't know quite how to get, that last mile is the hardest, and how to get there. And I kind of quit for like a year. And I ran into somebody who started talking about publishing, and she wasn't the person I was going to work with, because then I found Kathy, and she was far better person to work with publishing it. And I thought, I could do this. I could publish it. And the next day after I talked to Kathy, I created a publishing company called Fossil Creek Press, and which is the name of my third book, which I've just started writing, Where the Fossil Creek Flows. And anyway, we started talking about this, and the idea of My Lost Year came to me when I was having a discussion with someone about, I talked to all of these people I know who don't go to the office anymore, who were so chained to those offices that had to be there at 8 o'clock. And I know that feeling, you know, if you're not there at 8 o'clock, even though your child has strep throat, you know, why aren't you here at 8 o'clock? And now they're not going to the office at all. And we started talking about people we knew who had an affair in the office. And so now they're not going to the office anymore. And now they're not seeing these people anymore. What's happening with their life? And how is that progressing? And that kind of came out of that germ. So it started with a couple, which I placed in a fictitious suburb of St. Louis, which is kind of like Kirkwood. And they live in a big old Kirkwood house. And they had two really extraordinary careers that suddenly all crumbling when COVID hit. The main character was a tour director, sort of a merits kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
And that profession just disappeared from the face of the earth. And so, you know, it kind of started from that gem. And then it just kind of grew. And I think that as I was writing, it was growing every day. And I kind of knew where it was going.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until I just kept working it that I knew how to get there. So, but in the middle, I sat down and the words just flowed. It was just something that was me. And I sent it to some great nieces recently. And I said, I want you to read this because so much of my heart is in this book.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw during the year 2020, and I saw a lot of things happening that was so different in the world, not being able to travel or to go places and wearing a mask and not getting toilet paper and, you know, things like that, that I wanted to write about because I think 20 years from now, will people know what that was like? Will people understand that feeling of your children not being able to go to school, having to give up going to an office and stay at home and work with two children running around the house, you know, or losing a career, not just a job, but an entire industry. So that's kind of what I'm trying to say in that book. And the third book, Where the Fossil Creek Flows, is my early childhood. I grew up in West St. Louis County. For the first 10 years of my life, we had no running hot water or bathroom. We had a 3-room house, not a 3-bedroom house, a 3-room house, as my parents put their money on building a business. But we had a lot of love and a lot of great experiences. So that's
Is Fossil Creek an actual creek?
No, it's not. I don't know that the creek has a name, but it's full of fossils. And
this is by your home.
really,
Yeah.
Yes, it's in back of my family home, which is still there. My sister still lives there.
Wow.
On that property. And the business that my parents struggled to start is still going.
That's awesome. Do you ever get writer's block? And if so, what do you do?
Well, I tell you, I hate to say too much about my lost year because things happen. But there was something that happened in the book that was so sad. I tell you, my 4th editing, I cried. And maybe because I created these people, and when sad things happen, and when someone in the book died, I had to take 2 weeks off. I was like mourning. I mean, it was really crazy, but I had to take some time and breathe before I continued writing. But I don't think I ever I mean, I said in the middle, I didn't know how I was going to end it. And I just quit writing until I had until I found how I can publish it. And then I just knew I had the ending, and it went really fast. So sometimes a break is really good. And I also think I have a good friend who is a brilliant woman, was a vice president, executive of a Fortune 500 company. And she's very honest with me, and she is my sounding board. And both of my books, when I finished them, she read them and made suggestions. And you should go here, or this works, this doesn't work. And then I start reworking. And I don't think when you finish a book, it's never finished. I don't know that a book is ever finished. Actually, I'm thinking about re-editing in the middle because of comments that I've gotten from people who've read it. Having, and I hired an editor for my second book who was fabulous and is working really well with me. And we're going, fourth editings, we're getting things right and adding things here and there. And she'd say, oh, I think you missed this discussion. You had a discussion, but you didn't finish that discussion. And where is that going? And so you need people who can be sounding boards, who can read, who can edit, who can help you get it from what you finished to what you want to put out in the world. So.
No, that's great. I'm glad to hear that about that new editor. I'm glad that's working out.
Yeah, it was a great match.
That's great. Yeah, we get a lot of good compliments about her. So what do you like to do when you're not writing? I know you travel a little bit.
I hadn't traveled for 2.5 years,
right?
But I just got back from Seattle, which was a marvelous, inspiring trip. I think travel always is inspirational. But I teach Sunday school. I used to teach vacation Bible school back in the day when we could have that. Hopefully there'll be another time for that. I like to cook a lot and read, although when I'm really into writing, reading is a distraction. So I write all day and then I sit and watch something stupid on TV. And then, because reading is just gets my mind too distracted from the writing. And I've taken a break right now because I have a difficulty in how I spend my time trying to market a book and writing. And what I really rather do is just write and forget about everything else. But marketing the book and getting books published, I mean, those are all other activities that an author has to do.
Part of the book, yeah.
Yeah. I love having a published book. And it took me a long time to go out in public and say to people, I'm an author. But on this last trip I took to Seattle, I took some books and we moved around. We were in Seattle, we went to Olympic National Park, to a couple of different park hotels, and every place I went, I left them a book. And I said, I'd like for you, if you have a local library, in your hotel or whatever, I'd like for you to put this book. Twice someone say, oh, I know somebody who's having this experience and they really like to read this. But to be able to walk into a hotel and say, I'm an author and I'd like to give you one of my books is pretty cool.
It is. So Barry's got some great questions. So first, this is a book that's a combo fiction and memoir, right? And I think he's talking about In the Middle.
Right.
Yeah. And actually both of your books, the first two. Yeah. Are you reading Barry's questions?
I am reading his question.
Okay, good.
Well, first of all, I started writing from my memories, but a memoir, unless you're a former president or, CEO of a Fortune 500, nobody really cares about your memoir. And it's probably not real exciting. So it's going to require some enhancement in order to make it interesting. So as I started writing and I realized that I was not really writing true memories, plus memories are never true. My memories of things that happened from that book are not my sister's memories or my husband's memories. They're my memories, and other people will say, oh, that one didn't happen, that wasn't true. So I made it fiction. And as I made it fiction, that gave me the freedom to make things more interesting, to put in a kiss that shouldn't happen, to put in characters that I had in the book. I have a boss who's really mean. I have never in my life had a boss that mean, but it made the book interesting. It made the journey more interesting. So a lot of things were taken from my life, but you have to embellish and make it fun. So it's better as fiction. I know, an actor may be able to make his memoir just memoirs and nobody's going to argue with him, but
I know one of the phrases I've seen tossed around lately, people are trying to find a category or a phrase for that type of book. I have seen someone use nonfiction novel.
oh, I have a term
Yeah,
for my second book, My Lost Year, is historical fiction, current historical fiction, because I read a lot of historical fiction novels that are set on the one I'm currently reading is set in
right.
1830 or 1900. This is historical fiction, but it's set in 2020. So, I think my memoir is sort of historical fiction because there's some history in there and there's some fiction.
Mhm.
So that's a term I've been using.
I like that. And I do want to remind everybody, I'm getting a kind of a feedback, and I'm not sure if anyone else is hearing it. It could just be me. You are hearing it also? Yeah. Odd. Okay. Not sure
Yes.
okay, not sure what's causing that. Is it just when I speak?
Maybe I should talk softer. Would that help?
No, it's just when you speak, Kathy.
Just when I speak?
Oh,
Yeah, well, okay. Right now, we're going to continue to blame the computer gremlins. But and you're really here to hear Carin. You're not really here to hear me. So, well, as long as we can hear Carin, we're good. Thank you for that input.
did I answer your question, Barry?
Yeah, well, did you pitch it to mainstream publishers? Because I'm curious what genre they would put it in.
I did not. I was offered an opportunity to publish it with a Christian publisher, but I didn't like what they wanted me to change, which is why I didn't go that direction. And because this book was so personal to me, I didn't want people changing it. I am trying to pitch My Lost Year to a publisher. No success yet, but I'm going to work on that for a while.
So when you do, are you going to call it historical fiction, like you just said?
Yes.
Okay. And I like that term. I also like your term, Kathy, about nonfiction novel. Is there anybody else, or are there any other terms that you guys can think of to describe it as far as a genre?
Yeah, if you can think of another term, please drop it into the chat. It'd be great to share with everybody. Thank you for that, Barry.
Sure, thanks.
So we know a little bit about Fossil Creek and where the name came from. What else can you tell us about this third book? What direction is it going to go?
Well, the first sentence in the third book, the first book, in the middle, is about my mother. The third book is about my father. And spoiler alert, he died when I was 16. So that's a very traumatic part of the book. But it starts out that my father thought he would create a business by having a lot of sons, and he had 3 daughters. And that sort of sets the tone for the book. Now, in reality, my father did have a son not long before he passed away, but he was 50 when he finally had a son. But it's about how he encouraged, in the 1950s, 3 girls to be whatever they wanted to be and to do whatever he would have had 3 sons do. He never said, oh, you can't do that because you're a girl. I never heard that from him. It was push the wheelbarrow, shovel that, whatever needed to be shoveled. And I think that was a tone for my life, that when I went out into business in 1973, which is in telling my truth, I didn't have this, you can't do it because you're a woman, or you can't do it because you're a girl attitude, although I got a lot of it back. I heard people saying it, but it gave me a confidence to do things that a lot of other girls in 1973 weren't doing.
Now that's amazing. So where do your ideas come from? You seem to have this uncanny ability to finish one, go watch TV, watch something silly, come back and go, oh yeah, this will be my next one. And it's like they come to you so naturally. Where do you think they come from? Where do the ideas come from?
I think when I decided to write a chapter in Living My Truth, we talked about it. I decided to do it, and I just knew what I wanted to say. I mean, it took me a day to write that chapter because I think it had been something that was inside of me for 40 years, and it just wanted to be out. And I had talked to my daughter about writing a book about the prejudice and the things, the sexual harassment and stuff that I faced in the 70s and 80s in working for Fortune 500 companies. I was the first woman in a professional position at GE Plastics in Massachusetts. I was the first woman in a professional position at Monsanto's agricultural division. And they didn't know what to do with a woman. I mean, it was like, whoa, how do we talk now? How do we travel? It's like, I'm a person, really, how hard is that? And actually, the best friend that I told you that is my sounding board, she got a job with Southwestern Bell from a college interview but I also applied, but they refused to interview women because they didn't have the right questions to ask a woman. In 1973, they were told they had to hire women. And so they offered the position to the top 2 women in our class, which was University of Missouri Journalism School. But they interviewed men, but they didn't interview women. And that's how difficult it was.
And look how far we've come.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And equal pay, oh, for heaven's sakes. I was so far off.
That was not even part of the conversation back then.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, exactly.
So if you were to leave some words of wisdom for aspiring authors who either are not sure where to start or feel they have writer's block, what would your words of wisdom be?
Well, one of the things I often thought when I started writing my first book is that about Louisa May Alcott said she wrote for years fantastical stories, horror stories, exciting things that she thought is what people wanted to publish. And she was selling those stories until one of the publishers said, this isn't you. This has nothing to do with you, what you're writing. Write you, write your life, write from your experiences. And then when she did, she had a world-class book. So when I stopped trying to write, and I'd written for years and years, I tried to write children's stories, I've written poetry. I wrote a lot of things I got paid for, like, a brochure on kidney stone lithotripsy, or, a lawyer's website, those kinds of things I wrote and got paid for. But when I stopped writing for other people and wrote what was in my heart and what I wanted to say, I think is when I was more successful. So I examine your heart, see the things that you're passionate about, and see if you can find a story from that.
I love that. Now, do you have ideas in your head now? I know you're working on Fossil Creek. Do you already have ideas in your head on what the next book after that's going to be?
I have a couple ideas. I'm not really sure. I knew these first 3 books, I knew I wanted to write. And there are things that, I had a series of miscarriages. I had 3 or 4 miscarriages between my children. And that period of difficulty is something that I might write about.
Mhm.
but I have to find a way to make it not so heavy because that was a really dark
Yeah.
period. So I'm not sure. And this my early professional career could be Mad Men. I mean, if you've ever seen Mad Men, oh, I lived that world. It's New York City and the East Coast and all of that. And how to write that without somebody getting mad at me is something I'm working on thinking about. But I'm sure it's there. I'll find it.
Exactly. I have one more quick question. I know when we put together your first book In the Middle, tell us a little bit about your journey with the cover. How did you decide on that cover?
Oh, well, I had talked to a couple of different people about a cover and nobody seemed interested. And then I remembered I had a good friend through my church whose art I loved. She's an artist. She's exhibited in galleries all over St. Louis. And I called her. I hadn't seen her because we're not going to church anymore, 2020. I hadn't seen her in maybe a year. And I called her and said, would you be interested in creating artwork for the cover of my book? And before I got the words out, she said yes. After having been told no 4 times, she was like, and she wasn't even living in St. Louis anymore. And she said, let me read your book. So I emailed her what I had of the book. And she said she couldn't go to sleep that night because she had to finish it. She was so engrossed in it. And when she finished it, she knew what she wanted. And I loved it. And it's actually in a gallery now. Part of that artwork that she
Awesome.
created.
I
for my
see it
book
on
is
your
in a gallery.
wall. Yeah, I see it on
Yes,
your
yes.
back wall. Yeah, no,
I
that's
have it
awesome.
multiple places. Yeah.
Well, before we leave, I'm going to unmute everybody. And if you have any questions, let me see, we're going to, oh wait, that mutes us. And then, let me see here. So I just asked everybody to unmute yourself. There we go. If you have any last minute questions for Carin, please just jump in here. You've told us such a great story. We have no questions. That's awesome.
Do you think people should have sex on the first date?
Wrong kind of question, Barry.
Oh, damn. Is this the wrong webinar?
It's the wrong.
Oh, Barry, did you think you were interviewing a female applicant to your business?
Yeah. So
It sounds like you're stuck in the 70s.
Well,
what we will do with Carin's permission is when we send out the thank you for being here today. If anyone wants to connect with you to ask questions or for further information, you can let me know how best they can reach you.
Also, I have 5 books that I would be willing to send to someone who would like to email me and ask for a book.
Awesome. Do you want to, let's just drop your email into the chat here.
Carin, I'm curious, what kind of business did your dad start with the 3 girls? Because I can almost say ditto.
It's a florist business, but greenhouse, a grower. So we were growing flowers that sold on the St. Louis flower market, chrysanthemums, roses, also spring bedding plants, flowers, vegetable plants. It was a lot of labor.
It's still in business, right?
Yes, it's Fahr, F-A-H-R greenhouses. And I made their logo when I was in college, a long time ago. Let me.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Carin, putting your email into the chat. That way everybody will have it. And
Carin put it, got it.
we also have Joanne's also. Thank you, Joanne.
I thought you meant each of us, because I was thinking, well, how's she gonna know how to send it? But thanks, Kathy.
Yeah.
Oops.
We'll make sure we had
I
time
think
for
I
that.
put it in the wrong place.
Just make sure it says to everyone.
To everyone.
But so while she's doing that, we have another, oh, there it is. Fantastic. we have another author that we're interviewing next week. Some of you know Crystal Weigel. She was originally going to be one of our guests later in the year. And as you know, Crystal is pregnant and things are speeding up for her. So we agreed to get her in sooner rather than later. So we're squeezing her in next week. It'll be next Thursday and it'll be at 10:30 in the morning. So it's a little odd duck, but we'll be here next week with Crystal and she'll be talking to us about her experience, both as, I guess she's been in a couple of our anthologies. And some of you know her from Living My Truth. She was in that one with a couple of us that are on this call. So mark your calendar next week on September 30th. And then additional information about future, we've gone to now 2 Thursdays a week, 2 Thursdays a month. The second and fourth Thursdays will be our typical schedule going forward. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Carin, so much. I'm sorry, Barry, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I have a technical question, Kathy. The reason I showed up late is that your email had 2 links in it. The first one was for Google Meet, and I logged on there, and of course nobody was there. And so then I went back to your email, and it had the Zoom link. Is that something you're aware of?
Let me ask Julie whether she can delete that Google link. Thank
You
you.
can't.
You can't
No, it's Google's attempt to
move
decoy
us?
people into using their Google Meet instead of Zoom.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's always Zoom then.
Always
Yep.
Zoom. Yeah,
Okay, good. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thanks for clarifying that.
Sure.
Carin, thank you for being here. Everybody, thank you all for joining us today. And we'll see you next week. Hope you can join us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
These are great. Thank you, Kathy, and
Thanks.
everybody.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thank you, Karen. Thank you, Kathy.